The Full Exposure Podcast is made possible by Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn in appreciation for the contributions that artists and creative minds provide to our community. Arts and culture are essential to a rich and rewarding life, strengthening our overall well-being and our appreciation of all that we see, hear, and experience. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Full Exposure with me, your host, Brian Kelly. We are going to jump right into this episode. I'm going to keep my comments brief because this is a very important conversation about race, the riot that occurred in our Grand Rapids streets on May 30th. It's about police brutality and the systems that continue to create outcomes that make Grand Rapids one of the most segregated cities in the United States. My guest is Jonathan Jelks. He's an entrepreneur and leader in the downtown business community. His entrepreneurial efforts include Motu Viget Spirits, GRUSA Apparel, and Ambiance Kitchen and Lounge, which was affected by the riots directly. Jonathan moves unflinchingly in many social and entrepreneurial circles in and around Grand Rapids, and is someone I've come to admire very, very much. I also need to highlight for you that we've had two of Jonathan's business partners on this podcast last year. Andrea, SuperDre Wallace, and Willie the Kid. And these are great episodes. So please go into the Full Exposure Podcast archives and listen to these conversations. All three of these incredibly adept entrepreneurs are moving the city of Grand Rapids forward in many different ways. So with that, let's explore the bigger picture with my guest, Jonathan Jelks. But how about you? How did you, this may not open it, but I'm just curious, how did you handle COVID being locked in? How did you pass the time and keep working? And
I was extremely disappointed because, we had so much momentum with our different businesses.
Yeah.
And we were really looking forward to, kind of getting Ambiance open and on track there.
Well, Ambiance is that'll lead into two parts of the conversation because I think you and I want to just get into it because
start with current events,
and then we'll talk more about your various companies and what you're doing as an entrepreneur and inherently what you're doing as someone forwarding the community. But GR Ambiance is the first in 30 years African American owned, black owned restaurant nightclub in downtown Grand Rapids.
Yeah, definitely in that core downtown corridor. We've had some things on the outskirts of downtown.
Yeah,
but it's been a long time.
Yes, and so you had been going through a build out, were about to come online, then COVID hit.
Yep. Then
the riots hit.
Yep.
And you put out quite a dramatic post the other day, but set up what GR Ambiance is, what the philosophy is, and then we'll get into the riots.
Absolutely. Ambiance Kitchen and Lounge is it's a bar, lounge, restaurant. We're really excited about it. It's in the very heart of the city, down there on Apparel in Ottawa, in the Lead Yard building. And we were really excited to be a part of the growing ecosystem that is downtown Grand Rapids, right? We all come from the city, all of the partners in the business. We all grew up on the southeast side. And it's kind of a cool story that, we pulled our resources together and invested in this project. And Under Construction has done a great job with our build out. We've worked with CWD, obviously, who owns the whole block and owns about 40% of downtown.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to maneuver without, colliding with CWD in some way.
Absolutely. And Start Garden, who we have a partnership with and where our offices are at, is across the street, so the convenience was lovely. Mm-hmm. And so obviously being able to open up a cool spot, a happening spot for a young millennial man is a dream come true. And then COVID hit, obviously, and it just slowed our progress. We would have really been opening up about right now. Right, Memorial Day weekend would have been the perfect time to kind of debut Ambiance in all its splendor and all its glory.
Well, the interiors are looking amazing. The progress shots I've seen I just want for the audience, everyone to know your other business partners. We've had two of them on. Willie the Kid is a partner in Ambiance. SuperDre.
SuperDre is not in Ambiance.
Not in Ambiance, but she's part of Motu Viget, which is your liquor brand. So I'm just ticking off some of your interests, which are vast and growing. You have Motu Viget, which is a vodka brand. Is it Avanti? Avani.
Yep, Avani Supreme Vodka.
Avani Supreme Vodka, and also the Motu Viget sparkling wine. And that's took off, and last fall?
Yeah,
and then,
last August, yeah.
Yeah, last August. And then Momentum, then the vodka brand debuted that. And then you also have GRUSA, clothing and apparel line. Absolutely. I don't know who your partners are specifically. I know
Me and Willie.
You and Willie in that one. And then Ambiance has a few different, another partner at least.
AJ Hills the fourth, Jamal Chilton, and Lacey Jones.
But I would encourage everyone to go back, revisit the episodes with Willie the Kid and SuperDre, and you can see why you guys are these driven, unstoppable entrepreneurs and people I have tremendous respect for in the business game, but also people I can learn from personally in my own development and just as a business owner and father and someone who's trying to live in the community.
I appreciate that, Brian. That's high praise.
No, it's
coming from a legend like yourself. I'm honored to be here, man. This is big.
No, this is big, and this is the time that I can't think of a better time to have you and I on. We haven't personally spent a lot of time together one-on-one. We come from. You grew up in my neighborhood. Later, about 10 years ago, I bought a house around the corner from where the house you grew up in, where your parents lived all those years. And I regret not having more interactions with your parents. And you'd already been out of the house probably mostly at that point. But we live on the same block, or we're from the same block. At least where I'm raising my family is where you grew up.
Partly. Mostly I grew up southeast Grand Rapids on Sherman Street.
Okay.
So when I was in high school, my parents relocated to the Ottawa Hills neighborhood.
Okay, in high school.
Yeah, so I was cultivated. So most of my experiences were, from Sherman Street and that whole neighborhood down there, and then.
Well, your stock is rich because your parents are two of the smartest people I know. They're not afraid to speak their mind, and they've done a lot.
Did my mom contribute to the podcast today? Did she pay for advertising?
No, but I did portraits of your mom when she was at the city, and she's been had thing. And your dad's a professor and down in Kansas, and anyway, an author and all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So not afraid to tackle social issues and social justice issues, and for that to now, as we timestamp it, today is Grand Rapids is in the country, but we keep it narrow to our city. Of just in turmoil, and bring it back to Ambiance now. What happened on Saturday night?
On Saturday there were some really dynamic protests organized, and the community came out in droves. I've really never seen Grand Rapids activated in that kind of way around a social justice issue. Right. Usually the black community is out advocating for ourselves, and that's how it should be. I mean, that's how it should be, because you have to save yourself first. So I'm always of the belief that you take care of your own backyard, you take care of your own neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. But to see everybody come together from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, neighborhoods, just to collaborate for a very important moment after, seeing the death of George Floyd over there in Minneapolis, that was powerful.
And just to delineate, there were two sort of occurrences. One was a very peaceful protest and a march, or a gathering, I should say, around the police department. That was very peaceful. A lot of people came to that. It was a diverse. There was families there. There was kids there. There was every part of the community was part of that. And then when it became dark, it turned into some violent vandalism and some things that have, unfortunately, only temporarily, if I can have anything to do with it, distracted from the reason the first march happened.
Over 100 buildings being damaged downtown. Obviously, the courthouse caught the brunt of the activity, and not really the police station, but the courthouse and 82 Ionia. He said 82 Ionia on fire a little bit. So Grand Rapids has never seen that kind of extreme action in response to race relations, but it's not uncommon. And how Grand Rapids has been set up, to quote Malcolm X, it's kind of like the chickens coming home to roost. I just was surprised to see that it was so many young white kids on the front lines.
Yeah, and just to tie up what happened is you're on your street on on Pearl, where your restaurant is about to open. There was 5 cars on fire. One was a police vehicle from Wyoming, City, Wyoming, and it was dangerous. There was a lot of things happening. A lot of windows around there getting smashed.
Oh, yeah, they blew up. I mean, a couple SUVs blew up in front of our space, so we were definitely vandalized. They took one of the mannequins from out of the bridal shop that was around the corner, set it on fire and tried to throw it through our windows. Luckily, with all the stuff that they were doing and all the intense heat, we weren't damaged that badly. We had a few broken windows. That was it.
Yeah. Well, and you put out a really powerful statement that I want to just read and kind of go through with you, because I think it's important to amplify. I think there's a lot of noise on social media. Myself, I contribute to noise, but especially hearing it from you and your perspective, being a business owner downtown, an entrepreneur who's staked everything on creating your own opportunities. Because maybe before we get into it, I just think as a black entrepreneur, it's hard enough to start any business, but what you three and all your business partners and everything that you've done have taken territory. I think Willie said on the podcast, we're taking back some territory in terms of having our own opportunities downtown and creating it, and by force of your the smarts of your business plan, your everything that you're doing, are creating you're attracting now. Your people are coming alongside and supporting your businesses in a way that hasn't happened racially downtown in a long time.
Yeah, not even just downtown. I think with everything that we've been able to do, a lot of times, traditionally, African-American businesses are supported only by the African-American community.
Yeah.
When we founded GRUSA, some of our white friends would ask us, is it okay for me to buy it too? I'm looking at them like, you got to be kidding me,
Right.
But because Grand Rapids is so hyper-segregated, we have these lines drawn where if it's a black-owned business or it's meant to serve the black community, and the black community in Grand Rapids can never afford to operate like that, right?
Right.
We have to go to Meyer, we have to go to DeVos Place if we want to see the symphony. So we always are in an environment and in a setting that we don't necessarily own. So, we're used to doing that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we've had to, kind of train and have such intentional marketing in order to have a crossover audience. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we're living in here in the city.
Well, and I would just extend to just the systemic issues. It's harder to get financing. It's harder to get commercial loans. It's harder to the additional hoops, and I don't have any objective proof in front of me, but certainly there's a systemic issue too, that credit seems to be tighter for particular parts of the population than it is for somebody else.
Brian, that's a fact. What you just underscored there is the elephant in the room, right? I can go out tomorrow and get $60,000 for a Range Rover, get financing for that. But if I want $20,000 for my black-owned business, I'll be hard pressed for getting support. And I think that's the real crime, that goes on every day in our city systemically.
Well, what it does is it keeps people from pursuing whatever dream they have as an entrepreneur. It keeps them in whatever job they have because they're not able to get the initial influx of capital that they need to take the next steps to create their business. And when you do that, there's a lot of ambition and dreams and things that are they're out of circulation. They're not participating in the economy.
And that's the very foundation of the success that we've had here in Grand Rapids. If you look at big families, who have been able to, kind of build these business empires, man, that I'm very proud of, because I am proud of my city. I'm very critical of it because it's my job to hold it accountable and until the opportunities are there for everybody, whether you're from Granville Avenue or you're from Franklin and Eastern.
Yeah.
I'm going to be an advocate and point out where we're flawed. But I'm also very appreciative of what big business has been able to do out of my city in particular, because it's locally owned and it's locally invested. So when I look at a Meyer and I see what they've invested in West Michigan, in downtown Grand Rapids, or I look at a Pete Secchia and, what he's been able to contribute to having Michigan State be, one of those, those key points, on Medical Mile.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
at the same time, we have these systems that exclude people of color, and we've got to address that in order to be the city we aspire to be.
Well, and that gets back to the statement you put up on Facebook with some pictures, but I was pretty floored by this. You're talking about the African American community has had to suffer at the hands of law enforcement and the oppressive, broken systems across the country for too long. Not only have we not been heard adequately, but innocent blood has been spilled over and over and over, with a silent majority of people, I would say that would include me, watching from the sidelines in silence, while the black community has been left to our own devices.
Yeah.
The real black community that's from Grand Rapids, who make up the DNA of our neighborhoods, are fed up with the exclusionary practices that our city has long been perpetuating. The managerial racism in corporate offices and a power structure that window dresses the lack of investment behind the veil of creation of opportunities that, quote, benefit all, unquote, are infuriating. It still perplexes me that we have one of the fastest growing economies overall in the country, but that we are ranked, and by we you mean the city of Grand Rapids, if I can editorialize a second, as one of the worst cities economically for African Americans. We have overqualified black talent that is frozen out of opportunities every day. So let's not act like GR isn't a part of the problem.
Yeah, there was a narrative going around once the riots happened and in the coverage where, people were saying this isn't us. Oh, this definitely is us. Yeah. I just didn't expect to see, so many people who weren't from the black community on the front lines this go around.
Yeah.
But this is definitely Grand Rapids, man. There's been a few times before that I thought riots, could potentially happen here in the city, because there's been long-standing, turbulent, and tumultuous relationships with the Grand Rapids Police Department.
Yeah, a lot of incidents, especially, there seems to be, either through media exposure, these aren't new events, we're only seeing them, they're surfacing more quickly now and more often because of how we can document things as a community.
Absolutely.
But we definitely, like the entire country, we're seeing a powder keg of some things going on.
Yeah, a couple years ago, the police, they're pulling out guns on young kids in the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And that was the big issue that was before city commission, that activists and leadership and the neighborhood associations were in an uproar about, you know. So these things
are... 11-year-old black girl who was handcuffed, it just seemed ridiculous. Anyway, but there's a lot of those types of things that are coming to light. They pop up more frequently. But in terms of your statement, I think there's a couple of things in there that I'd like to break down a little bit more, and that is just to have a conversation around. Let me just pull something out here. There was so much in there. I think one thing is the managerial racism of corporate offices and power structure that window dresses the lack of investment behind the veil of the creation of opportunities.
Some run-on sentences in there.
No, but it's what do you do? There's a lot.
I had to get it. It was like birthing a baby. I had to get it. I wrote it and typed it on Facebook fast and furious.
Yeah. Well, but there are these systems. It's harder to get rent. It's harder to be approved for leases. It's harder to do all kinds of things.
Yeah. But even deeper than that, when I walk into some of these companies who I have the highest regard for, and I don't see, an African American executive. I don't see an African American vice president. I don't even see, an African American secretary.
Yeah.
I know, people have these new diversity initiatives to address it, but I've been very disappointed in the lack of, the lack of color that I see in some of these spaces. And if we want to become a global city that can compete with Seattle and can compete with Japan and can compete with Chicago, then we're going to need to abandon some of our old insular ways and really embrace people coming from other spaces and places.
Well, and that has to be an intentionality now, because I think there's two types of systemic problems. One is people who don't see a problem. That's obviously a problem. There's other people who, and because they don't see a problem, they never get around to creating intentionality behind the people and the faces and the talent that they hire to further their organizations. So there's certain industries that are very white-centric. There's but they don't need to be. Like you said, the talent's on the sidelines waiting for the opportunity. And it takes these business leaders, these entrepreneurs, these VPs, these presidents, whatever the ownership structure and management structure looks like, it takes intentionality to change the profile of a company and who's getting opportunities. So until they recognize opportunity, the opportunity in front of them, it won't change.
Absolutely. And that's why we have to make the argument that it's not just a charitable thing that you're doing by helping your company to become more diverse.
Right.
It's there's a value proposition for your business.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you have to articulate, hey, you're going to continue to lose top talent to another company where that Indian guy feels more comfortable and more represented.
Yeah.
And so those are things that we really need to look at because we have companies that are growing faster than the talent that we can kind of put into the pipeline here, and then we're under investing in the talent that is here that can be working in these companies.
Yeah,
it's kind of like why we AJ Hills IV and I created the Midwest Tech Project, right? We wanted to create that tech talent pipeline so that we could get kids interested in coding, which is in new manufacturing, get them interested in artificial intelligence and automation, all these things that are going to kind of, dictate the economy moving forward.
Yeah.
And so we know we needed to be intentional to make those connections. And, Carl Erickson over there at Atomic Object has been a great partner for us. Meredith Bronk over at OST has been a great partner for us.
Those are two really powerful. We should pause on them because I think Carl has always been very progressive, even when he was a younger company coming up. And OST seems to have, not only are they tremendously successful, but they've seem to be especially community-minded and continually on a path of improvement.
And the fact they have a female CEO, I mean, that in and out of itself in the tech industry is an anomaly, but it needs to become standardized, right? We shouldn't be shocked and wide-eyed when we see Meredith, who's one of the smartest people in West Michigan, do her thing.
Yeah. I have a friend in Detroit. She's an R&B singer. She's worked on a lot of Tyler Perry, stage shows and things like that. But Monica Blair, and she said something interesting on Twitter, and that was, people will never hear you until they see you. And I don't know if that's her own quote. That's probably been out there before in the ether, but that hit home for me because unless I can sit down and have. That's what I don't like about social media in this time. We can all vent and put out frustrating things, but until you and I are sitting at a table or they pull a commission of people from Grand Rapids to address issues, it's just noise and hot air. Although I think that people speaking out lends to more people speaking out. But I don't know. Is there anything you wanted to just drill into that? Just the idea of being seen and then heard and then understood.
Well, I mean, I think that several of us have been seen and heard. We're at those tables when it comes to, decision making to a certain degree. But there are still some missing gaps. And those missing gaps are a little bit more important. And this is why we need to, have those relationships with the business community here, because we have roundtables, at the city of Grand Rapids, and, we pay for outside consultants to come in and kind of help us with studies, whether it's from the Brookings Institute or, these different places. But the action and the implementation is where we seem to fall short. And then we also fall short with real relationships. We have a lot of resources. A good friend of mine, Dale Ross, he always says that GR is resource rich and systems poor. We're one of the most charitable communities in the world, but we still need the same charity, so that means it's not working. You don't want to have to be giving to the same charities 10 years from now,
Right.
Certain things will be around forever, right? Like world hunger, somebody's going to be hungry in the world and you want to contribute to that. But we have a whole bunch of targets here in Grand Rapids that are extremely solvable. We just need to look at the bullseye and actually stop being afraid and partner with the people who have the indigenous wisdom and knowledge, and do our work, put our heads down, do our work, and get it done.
Yeah. Well, I want to just loop back to those tests. There was those studies that we are ranked. These are government funded and produced tests, which are, and the results of those studies talked about income disparity, all kinds of different home ownership, and just systematically. And you can draw a map. You talk about redlining or whatever you want to do. You can just look at the demographics of the city from just that viewpoint, and you can point to the areas of lower income without even referring to the study.
And they're always right next door to places that are more affluent. That was an interesting thing about growing up on Sherman Street, which I have to say was critical in my entire development and formation in the way that I think about race in America.
Yeah.
Because I lived in what we would call the eye of the storm. Like my block had a lot of stable family homes, but there was also a ton of different things going on in the city at that time. The crack epidemic is one of the biggest influences, I think, for any millennial, or Generation Xer that grew up in the core city,
right.
In the 80s and 90s. And I'm a 80s baby, grew up in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so seeing, the home of Gerald R. Ford and, East Grand Rapids, right down the block by St. Stephen's, which we talked about earlier. Yeah. And then you start to come in on the our block and the blocks further towards Fuller Street. Yeah. You knew that there was abject poverty and real things going on, and there was warfare going on as a kid.
Well, even in Ottawa Hills, you go south of Hall Street and north of Hall Street, especially as you align closer to east, and those are different worlds. And you go across Giddings, or you go across towards MLK Park, it's a different world, and that's. I don't know how we change that necessarily in the short term. I don't think that's the point. The point is that we have these hard lines that stop this influx of communication, this cross-pollination of ideas, of love and concern for your neighbor, and also just empathy for how if you can't recognize your privilege, you can't really... there'll always be I did this, but you're doing that type of thing.
Well, let me be the Pete Sampras to your Andre Agassi, right?
Ooh, now we're talking.
I'm thinking a little different now, man. My experiences have led me to become a little bit more mathematic. And in being mathematic and being logical, one can take that as being cold. But I think that ownership and economic empowerment is one of the key ways that we can solve a vast majority of the systemic issues that we have around race in America.
Okay.
And so while I love the sentiments, and I think that there will, be people like yourself who are conscious, who will become, woke and awake to the issues, right? I'm not holding my breath for it, but what I am what I am willing to protest about, what I am willing to apply pressure in our community with different institutions about, is not having the same access to opportunity that other communities have had. Yeah. And I think when you hear Willie talk about, real estate and territory, a part of our ethos and our philosophy is to be unrelenting in seizing opportunity. And that's the only reason why we've been able to achieve, and we haven't achieved a whole lot yet. We're young and there's a long way to go, but where people are deriving some inspiration from our stories and from the limited success that we've had, it's because we don't hold you up. We're in it to win it. We'll fight with you about what we think we should have and what our community should have, and we're not going in to have a door open for us and then close it for everybody else. I want everybody who grew up in that uptown neighborhood, from Wealthy, all the way up to Franklin. I want them to be able to access those same opportunities. And if I haven't done that, then I haven't done my job.
I think that's what is a tractor to see your momentum. At least, I don't know. I've just been watching you guys a lot over the last 3-4 years when GRUSA launched and these other things, and just seeing how you embrace the city. And it would have been easy to start a wardrobe, like an apparel company.
Yeah.
That just had combative messages all the time about the city. And like your hat that's on right now, it's the logo of the city of Grand Rapids.
Sure.
And that hometown pride and Will's hometown pride, and you bring all that with you as the foundation to move the city forward. So as you're being forceful in whatever it is, negotiation, providing opportunities, getting a seat at the table. I know you were with the police chief yesterday. You had mentioned having meetings about all kinds of problems in the community in light of the riots and the protests going on. That the underpinning is this love of the community, but also this you're casting a big net that you want everyone to get swept up into in terms of having your own, providing opportunity. And
when you have ownership in your community, like I own my house, so I still I'm invested in my city. Mm-hmm. Like I don't look at Grand Rapids as Mr. DeVos's city or Jay Van Andel's city. I look at it as Jonathan Jelks. It's just Mr. Jelks' city as well, right? And so when you have ownership, it prevents you from having a destructive mind state. It prevents you from feeling so hopeless that everything around you is expendable. Mm-hmm. I have a stake in what happens in Grand Rapids, and I believe that it can change, and I believe that we were working on it. I believe the city has evolved and come a long way in the last 5 years. I mean, I remember when Jamil Robinson and Jamil, one of my partners who founded Grand Rapids area black businesses, we first started engaging with Start Garden about, economic development in the black community. And we were kind of strange bedfellows. The city of Grand Rapids put us together. They said, you guys are doing some great things, and you have these ideas that you want us to implement and work with you guys on. And Start Garden is this vessel. And I'm like, Start Garden, that's an entity that was foreign to working in those areas to us. Yeah. But when we sat down with our friend Paul Moore and our good friend Mike Morin, and we started hashing it out and just having conversations about where opportunities lie and where they don't, we were able to create an awareness that wasn't previously there. Yeah. And we ended up partnering with them formally, and it was great. We ran a business accelerator, out of Start Garden, in collaboration with them, and their wisdom and their knowledge and our resources and tools and knowing the community has proven to be quite effective. And from there, they just blossomed, So Daryl Ross ended up coming over there as executive director, and
that was
Jorge
huge.
Gonzalez. And so now Start Garden is looked upon. It's funny, we still chuckle about it, but Start Garden is looked upon as this beacon of diversity when it comes to the economic ecosystem.
But how intentional was that hire? You had Paul Moore at the beginning there. You had Ben Gott being part of
Shout
that.
out to Ben.
But it took a very intentional by leadership and with the family involved being the DeVos family that helped fund Start Garden, and along with community partners. But
it was a process, though. Ben, if you got him on here, he had to, co-sign me and say, hey, Jonathan's a good dude. I've been, in collaboration with him, before, and he's a friend of mine, and I love what he's done with the public schools, because me and Ben went and did some stuff at my alma mater, Ottawa Hills High School. And, I'm sure, he had to have some conversations like, this is a good guy who's intentional about building up Grand Rapids. He has a vision, and we should support that, and I appreciate him for that.
Well, and then to go ahead and put the so to speak money where their mouth was, they hired Daryl Ross and Jorge, and then Paul. So you have this tri-leadership that's happening that has three very different historical perspectives and styles of management and views on how to be successful and how different people need to move as entrepreneurs and incubate and create connections for each other. It's amazing to see how then diverse the grant making process is.
Absolutely,
because not just yourself, but Daryl and Jorge have connections inside the city that can better explain and welcome people into the opportunity of entrepreneurship.
That's it. And I love what they did, going out and gathering some information from Dan Gilbert and what he was doing in Detroit.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely. Because Dan is more cavalier. You know, he's a first-generation billionaire.
He's a Cleveland Cavalier.
He is a Cleveland Cavalier.
Mean that
I did not mean that, but that's cool. That's cool. I like when that happens, when it all comes together. It's beautiful.
For sure.
But Dan, you know, he's been innovative with his resources. He's from Detroit. He cares about the city. He owns about 90% of downtown.
Yeah, he went on a buying spree for sure. But
He
he's
did.
not just sitting. He's not squatting on it. He's doing stuff with
He
it.
gets money out into the streets. And a big focus of his is because Detroit is an African-American city historically and still is today.
It's like 83% African-American.
Exactly. He makes sure that the different vehicles, the venture capital firm, or if it's his big his thing that's akin to 100 Ideas, the Detroit Demo Day, where $2 million goes out to, you know, local entrepreneurs, not just like the tech stuff that's going on, you know, but, you know, the barbershops, the beauty salons, the people who have good ideas for bakeries, as downtown synergy hopefully is growing in some of the ancillary neighborhoods. Dan was a good model for what Start Garden wanted to do. And I was there when, you know, they were going and doing that market research. It was cool.
Do you know, you just mentioned a couple of things, but do you know Sebastian Jackson from the Social Grooming Club?
We've met before, yeah. We're on LinkedIn. We've met before. I met him at Detroit Demo Day, Dan Gilbert's thing, and then I met him with Ben Gott at a party last year.
Yeah, he's. I've known him a long time. I met him through a portrait project I was doing in Detroit. It started maybe 7 years ago, and he was one of the first. I did portraits of him in his barbershop right by Wayne State as it was under construction, and then I went back. I'm actually one of my favorite portraits I've ever done is him in the salon as it is, the barbershop as it is now, with all the reclaimed wood.
Yeah.
His whole barbershop is a metaphor for rebirth, taking wood from burned out houses, destroyed houses around Detroit, and put it in the salon. They recycle the hair. They do all kinds of things. But he's draped in an American flag.
I saw that image. Yes.
He's one of. There's been a lot of people on both sides of the state that have, deepened my understanding and broadened my perspective on a lot of things. And he's one of the originals because I remember just really having a lot of my eyes opened by intentionally going to Detroit and seeking opportunities. I wasn't seeking relationships with, quote, black people. I was just wanting to do a portrait project. But inherently, then you learn how much of the community is African American.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's such an amazing city. I don't know. I don't want to get too diverse or too off track in Detroit, but just having that experience there. But there are modalities there that have been successful that have moved the urban center, downtown center very quickly. Yeah,
Detroit can learn from Grand Rapids, right? Us being a little bit more conservative, us having, the billionaire families that invest directly back into Grand Rapids. I mean, think about it. 30 years ago, we could have very well become, Flint.
Yeah.
Or look like how Muskegon, is looking now. They're trying to bounce back. But, deindustrialization completely affected Michigan. It completely affected our urban cores and our centers, right?
Yeah, we had to move to Rust Belt 2.0 or 3.0 or 9.0. We had to reinvent.
And who's the leader of that? Grand Rapids, Michigan, because we have such forward-thinking leadership in the business community who worked well with government. Government cooperated, the business community cooperated, and they did what was best. And so we were preserved, and then we were able to grow. So, during times when everybody else was going down, we were going up. But what Grand Rapids can learn from Detroit is how they embrace diversity. How they embrace culture.
It really is a beautiful city. I used to have a studio there for 2 years too, and I would go back. It was a place it had a bed and a kitchen and a full bathroom and things, but it was a small lofted, studio right down in Corktown. And I loved Corktown, but I also, as I would move throughout the city, it was such a stark difference when you went to great restaurants or a bar or whatever. The diversity in every room, like the effortlessness with which racial makeups hang out together in Detroit is something that Grand Rapids we can't even touch it yet.
Not at all.
Not even close in terms of That's why some of the parties and events that you put on with Motu Viget are some of the most diverse parties that I've seen at the Art Museum or the Public Museum as well. And that takes time.
And trust.
And it's also, but I just have never been in a community. I grew up here. I grew up in white-dominated, pretty much majority Grand Rapids, and grew up in the burbs and went to Northview High School. Yeah. And, but that sort of effortlessness of just being in a room or just hanging out is something it's truly rare in Michigan to have that.
Us being insular in Grand Rapids has been used as a strength in the past. It's kept us out of a lot of things, right? But being too homogenous in our thinking, in our social circles, in our networks, has been a downfall. Even in industry, right? Mm-hmm. My friends who are in tech don't often, talk to some of my friends who are in the restaurant industry, and I think there's something missing there. Mm-hmm. Grand Rapids just isn't one of those communities where you have people with a plethora of different experiences all coming together, converging, sharing knowledge, sharing information. And so you end up being limited and only, kind of knowing about your particular area of expertise. And so there's very few people who are connectors.
Right.
And so I think one of me and my partners, our jobs is to make sure that we're connecting the dots between people who come from, different places.
Well, I want to ask you about, I want to go back to Willie the Kid's episode, and there's a viral clip that went out of Willie talking about how you guys met, the first time you met him. And it's powerful in that and I'll paraphrase it, but I'd like more of your side of the story, because it went crazy on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and it was one of those that Willie the Kid was working in the studio and you were somehow around there. But there was some issue or something that he needed, and you just said, "How can I help?" Yeah. And Willie was blown away by it. Yeah. He's like, "Who's this guy asking me, how can I help you?" So what was that moment, and what was, just talk about how that moment then became fast forward to this multi-pronged, business ventures together.
It was cool, man. He was in my neighborhood. He was on my block on Sherman Street. And, him and another mutual friend of ours, they were doing music together or whatever. And I already knew who he was. He already had a reputation. He had already, moved to Atlanta or whatever. And, he was, and he's an amazing artist. Will's an amazing artist. And we got to give that man his flowers, while he's here. Because, coming out of Grand Rapids, going to college down there in Atlanta, and then, signing a major recording contract in the industry, that's no small feat. Right. So he really opened up a lot of doors. But he was building that buzz to be able to sign that major recording contract at that time. And I knew who he was before that. And Will's a little bit older than me. And so when he was down there and he needed something, I was like, oh, I gotta, look out for him. I gotta do that. I respected the art. I'm a kid that grew up on hip hop. So, listening to, Nas and Biggie and Wu-Tang, that was the formation of how I viewed the world. They were saying things, that were going on that I was seeing in my neighborhood. And I related to that. And Willie even brought that home even more because, he was right there. He's from the city. He's from Southeast Grand Rapids, from a different neighborhood. But, the things that he was talking about were actively going on. And so I jumped at the opportunity.
Well, and what's funny is that I became aware of Willie the Kid through his business ventures, not through his music. Exactly. That's a blind spot in my, catalog of music that I dip into. It's just outside, and to know somebody locally who'd been successful, just kind of off my radar. Even though I think I listened to a lot of different music, but. Point is, I came to know him through, or came to hear of him through your partnerships and doing some things. And I was looking into, I was like, holy shit, this guy's got this whole other music career. Really, he's from Atlanta now, essentially, but he's in Grand Rapids, of course. But
Grand Rapids
putting his money here, what I mean, like really creating opportunities here.
What I told him is, bro, you're down there in Atlanta, and you've been down there for years, and have built up quite a beautiful life down there. But I said, your money will go further up here at home. And I said, we're working with venture capital, up here in Grand Rapids. And me and Jamil had a lot going on within the business ecosystem, and we're finding different ways to invest our resources. And I said, hey, man, you need to be intentional about investing back home, and you should do it with us. Because me and Will already had, GRUSA, so we had a venture together, and we have some other things that we don't talk about that we do together. But I said, you need to be more intentional about investing at home, because this is where that impact will most be felt. Mm-hmm. In Atlanta, there are a ton of black millionaires. There's probably a couple people who are close to being billionaires out of the city. Atlanta doesn't need you to be a business success in order for their operation to keep going. But in Grand Rapids, where we're the second worst city economically for African Americans, for them to see your success, for that to be represented, at our alma mater, Ottawa Hills High School, for that to be represented downtown, for that to be represented in scholarships that we give out, that means more to this community than you can ever imagine, and it's your legacy. Here is where your legacy is cemented, not down in Atlanta.
Well, it's powerful, and then to see how quickly that has merged into more and more visible and maybe riskier businesses. As you build on top of success. Just talk about, just in general, it's not through. But just your appetite for taking on projects that seem difficult, just from a business standpoint, not because of social issues, but just, what is your approach when you have an idea, and how do you vet it enough to know, okay, this is something we're going to deploy a lot of energy into to make successful?
Like Motu Viget, that's a good one. Will was all about that. He was like, bro, we have to do this. I've been dreaming about being in the craft brew industry, and he wanted to do a brewery, and he's always had different ideas because he's a foodie. And so, we have relationships over there at St. Julian, Michigan's largest winery. Those guys were familiar with, our reputation, and knowing that, we had some good businesses and stuff going on. And, they were excited by the potential to work with us. And I was like, Will, you really want to, pursue this? Because it seems a bit grueling. And we have some things that, will have a quicker return on investment. I'm always thinking about the ROI, the risk versus reward. And then if there's a niche, is it uncharted territory for us? Because I'm always interested in doing that. That's just part of being an African-American, I think, but then also just being Jonathan, right? Wanting to do some things that, other people haven't done.
Yeah. And
I was like, man, it seems kind of cliche. You're the rapper, I'm the business guy, but we're doing spirits, we're doing liquor. Like, can we really even get a piece of the market share?
Just like finding shelf space and retail, how do you it's harder to.
But I knew I had we have the relationships in the city to be in a mire.
Yeah.
We knew we had the relationships to, get out here and get after it. Everybody who's with me, they have to have hustle. So that's like one of the factors. Like Jamil, anybody who works for him has hustle. SuperDre, she's so multi-talented and still finds a way after, doing her day job, which is, running things tech-wise.
She's incredible. That episode is crazy. I don't know how she's constantly communicating and on social, and it's just the bandwidth that she has is unbelievable. And she's doing complicated coding work and software work. It's this app platform development. It's unbelievable.
Vetting whether she should, they should acquire a company or not. Like, she does it all.
Yeah.
And she still hustles.
Yeah.
The woman has so much hustle. And so that's something that has to be in the DNA of everybody that, is around. And Will just said, man, to bring it back to Motu, he said, this is a great opportunity because we don't have to do all the work on our own. We can put together the systems and have things in place and have an infrastructure and then do what we do best, which is create the lifestyle and market and make people connect with the product.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about how you, what is my business has been at a standstill during COVID. I'm just starting to get back online. I don't know how many projects are going to be coming my way in the initial push. Marketing budgets for my industry, I think, are, if they exist anymore for 2020, they're not what they planned in 2019 for them to be in 2019. So I have concerns about my own just my industry and, when projects come available, how quickly do they come to me, for quite frankly. But how did this shutdown hurt you or in one way or another and forced you to pivot? And is there positives out of that?
Yeah, there was positives. You got a chance to sit back and enjoy your family and think about things and reflect and plan. But we had so much momentum coming into 2020 that it was just hard to sit down. It was very difficult to accept that this health crisis is one that you can't afford to, play ping pong with. So you gotta, be inside and kind of quarantine and kind of watch things play out. And so it's definitely slowed money up, definitely delayed us finishing Ambiance and getting open. Even with Motu Viget, we weren't able to approach it as aggressively as we had been. We had some great events that were going to come about in the future because we started off lovely. The event that we had at the Grand Rapids Art Museum, the gala that I did with AB, who's another one of those guys, right?
He's been a guest too, yeah.
Those cultural architects, a good friend of mine. He's just a very, very sharp dude. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a Motu Viget event, but we obviously, utilized that to kind of introduce Avani to, the public and to a wider audience. Right. And it was great. It was great. That was one of my favorite events that I've curated because everybody got dressed up. It was a high ticket price, and I know Grand Rapids people, they don't like to pay for entertainment around here. They like to keep it.
Tell me about it. I used to own an art gallery. They don't want to invest in tangible art.
Very, very frugal community we have, but it was a beautiful event. You were there.
Yeah, I was not at that one.
You weren't at that one.
A couple of other ones.
That was the party of the year, man.
I know. I missed it, and I had AB hitting me up. I think Will was like, "You coming to this?" And it was more like a direction. It was more like, you are coming to this. And I just, we got Dynamics family at home. It's so hard for me to get
That's
out.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
But remind me when the launch was of Avani.
The launch, the soft launch, so the private invite only thing was at Long Road.
You're right.
Who was our partner for that.
And I was at that. But what date was it? What month was that?
January 17th.
Okay, so that, because I distinctly remember it's snowing so hard when I left. And it seemed like not too long after that, in late February, March, is when all this went down. I was like, oh, man, these guys just did the soft launch.
We did the soft launch. We did the museum event, and then we threw a big bash on the 28th at 21 Row Live. We rented out 21 Row Live. That was the official kind of launch to the wider community. Yeah. The party.
That was a party.
And it was a party.
I didn't go to that either, but I don't go to anything hardly. But when I do get out, I try to do what I can. But that looked like an incredible event. And people turned out, the black and the white, the meaning the wardrobe and the evening, it was like a cocktail party. It was people were dressed up. But that just underscores how recently COVID happened and put the brakes on some of your efforts.
And I was just shocked, too. Some of our neighbors are going out of business. I saw Grand Central Market around the corner over in Monroe Center. They're going out of business. And I saw Mark Sellers, who's somebody that we look up to in the business ecosystem, is doing some restructuring.
Yeah, Hopcat, just Mark Sellers is the founder and owner of Hopcat. And they have restaurants and bars all over the country. And they are reorganizing under Chapter 11. But, and that's where I'm speaking to the recovery in my industry. I think we're just starting to see businesses that are going to throw in the towel because they just can't sustain it. Yep. And so there's this longer tail to the recovery. We're going to see some implosion of, unfortunately, some incredible businesses. And, I'm thinking about what can I do to pivot? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just being really raw and candid because I don't know how fast I'm going to have people working with me on advertising campaigns or corporate communications, whatever it is. There'll be a need, but then whether I can sustain a business based on their budgets is a question I'm asking myself all the time.
It's real for everybody.
Yeah.
There's cash shortfalls for everybody. Especially if you're an entrepreneur and there's just no way you calculate something like this.
Right.
there's no way that you can prepare yourself for a health crisis that's going to eliminate all work for 3-4 months.
We just need a meteor to hit the world. I mean, it's pretty much the only thing left at this point.
And then that's why the riots. So I understand all the frustration, right, about systems and where we need systems change here in Grand Rapids, and I'm all for that. But I can't act like I didn't have on heart for my fellow entrepreneur downtown. There's a Mexican restaurant that's around the corner from Ambiance that got completely demolished and ransacked during that time. And, of course, everybody has insurance, but you have to pay those deductibles, and you haven't been getting rent for 3-4 months. So,
yeah.
I mean, you haven't been getting revenue for 3-4 months. So,
yeah, and I looked at it a couple ways, and maybe you can. I'm interested in your opinion, because I haven't put this out onto social, but I guess I'll put it out on the podcast, is that part of me, I looked at it as two separate events. There was vandals, and vandalism is not protesters. And there's two separate things. I understand the damage that can come from a riot that is seated in these things that's just going to boil over. My view on the Grand Rapids stuff that I have, and this is something that I may change my mind on, so I just want to cover my ass on it, because I did not care about broken windows downtown. When I saw especially how quickly the brooms came out and the cleaning up the spray paint, and the boards went up to protect the businesses that had their windows smashed, there's a lot of dollar damages. But to your point, and this was my opinion of it, is those businesses wouldn't have leases if they didn't have insurance. They wouldn't have bank loans unless they had insurance. And how quickly, another week or two, once those windows are replaced, is the stain of that riot going to be invisible when you walk around? What you cannot sweep up quickly, metaphorically, is the mess of the systems and the racism that we have.
Agreed.
So I didn't care about the property. I was not clutching my pearls saying, people smashing windows.
Well, and see, I think that my post that you read the second paragraph, but my first post was empathetic to business owners, right?
Absolutely.
Because when I saw these kids, trying to throw the trash can through our front window, and I saw them lighting stuff on fire, I immediately came down there at 1:30 in the morning.
I'm not condoning
No, I know you're not.
Yeah.
No. Let me say.
Sure.
I know you're not condoning it. I'm not either, but I immediately came down there because if I was there, that wasn't going to happen. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I was prepared for a conflict or whatever needed to transpire because we've invested, almost $1 million into that space. We have our livelihoods tied up into what we're doing there business-wise. So we took that personal. However, me being a black man from Grand Rapids and me knowing how Grand Rapids has operated for years and years and years and years, and then nationally as well, like what the oppressive systems have caused and the harm that's been done. Man, like Martin Luther King said, riots are the language of the unheard. People have been unheard, and this is the collateral damage. So I go back to my first statement from Malcolm X when he said, the chicken's coming home to roost. Now, he was speaking about President Kennedy at that time, and that was very callous. But in our case, I think it's bubbled over, man. Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, the list goes. Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, like over and over and over. We have these. So we have stories of that kind of stuff happening here in Grand Rapids. Thames Hawkins. Go back and look up that guy from our community, somebody that we knew growing up, and how he met his untimely demise, and in relationship to the police department. So we have real issues here in Grand Rapids. It's not everywhere else, and people just, projecting their frustration from a national situation here in our city. In our city, these issues are real.
Right.
And so.
Well, my only regret about the property damage is the inherent distraction of the message and the co-opting and the polluting of the problem in the first place because property got damaged.
Exactly.
And people closed their minds to listening because, vandals did this and they did that. So that's a shame, and that's the real stain of the vandalism. It isn't that these businesses can't be operating very quickly again.
And I'll say this, man. People have been murdered on camera before in the black community nationally, and there was nobody out there with us, protesting, and there were no big corporations showing their solidarity. There was none of that, right? Philando Castile got murdered, 2-3 years ago?
And that was in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, shot his kids in the car. Yep. I mean, come on, this stuff has been going on far too long. So I don't know if the world would be paying the attention to it if it didn't get rambunctious, if it didn't get violent in some cases. And I hate to say that because, that's not what I am trying to endorse or incite.
No, and I'm not suggesting that. But when you add the frustration of being told how to protest when Colin Kaepernick cannot take a knee,
exactly,
and told he can't just take a knee,
exactly,
that was not violent,
exactly.
But they all shit on him for that,
exactly,
and they all perverted his message. They made it about the flag and disrespecting the military.
Yep.
That's not what he was about.
Exactly.
That wasn't why he knelt, and that pisses me off. But that happens. And so, to the extent that I understand the need to create attention, forcing you to look at us.
Yeah.
And by us, I mean our systemic problems.
Yeah.
And we have a community that is disproportionately disenfranchised.
Absolutely.
Over and over and over again in every part of our society. Doesn't mean there's not opportunities. There are success stories. There are people blazing a trail, but that's not enough. That's not enough. And to get people to give up, if they view it as they have to give up something or have less, that's where you become invisible.
Or that, hey, it's got to be taken at a certain point.
Exactly.
If you keep your foot on the neck of people for so long, eventually, every uprising in history, people are gonna respond accordingly. And when people do respond, it's gonna look ugly.
Well, and we don't have a president right now who can be a calm and assure anyone and believe anything he says that will be any kind of authentic gestures to where we're going as a country to
Absolutely.
be more unified. So I think I can just say and cover both of us, we're not condoning riots and violence. We're understanding the need for all elements of the country to pay attention to very specific problems that have created this frustration and inequality in the first place.
I know exactly where it comes from. And we've got to make change. I think what I said at the end of that statement that you read from is that if we don't make the change, it's kind of like no justice, no peace. It just is what it is. That statement rings true.
It's also an invitation. It's an invitation to the wider party of a wider table.
Absolutely.
And expanding the table for more people to have a voice and to shape. It's not having a voice and then let other people change and alter the system. It's participating on every level of that to affect the change. So it is an invitation. There are positive things that will come of this if we don't let the moment and let certain groups run out the clock.
Yeah, and overwhelm us, right?
Right.
With just one aspect of things, there's tremendous opportunity. I mean, again, things could have been a lot worse in downtown Grand Rapids. I saw, some of the things that went on out in the Bronx and in Brooklyn and in not just out west. There are far worse things happening as a result of this death, which has kind of triggered Black America, and not only Black America, but a younger generation of white America who stands in solidarity.
I was amazed by how young, and again, I don't know, there's a difference between vandals and protesters, speaking again about the riots in Grand Rapids, but I watched that live stream on Wood till maybe 3 a.m. I couldn't put it down. But how young the people were. They were probably, most of them, under 30 after 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And
the people under 30 have far less to lose, too, And I can honestly say I remember seeing the L.A. riots, and I was a little kid when that happened.
Yeah.
and telling my mom, and she got on me for this. You know, me and my dad were watching stuff on the news, and I said, I would be out there rioting too. If I was 22 and the wrong action happened by an officer while we were out there peacefully protesting, obviously my parents raised me right, so I wouldn't go out and be destroying other people's property for no reason. But if I was 22 and there was a wrong reaction to, you know, my peaceful protest and I agitated, I could very well see myself participating in something that I had no business doing.
Yeah.
Because that's how passionate I am about my community. That's how passionate I am about the injustice that, you know, black people have received since, you know, we've been brought illegally here to this country.
I feel the same way. I think there's something that happens once you're over 35 where you're that part of your brain where you think you're bulletproof and nothing's bad going to happen to you physically or in life or whatever. That switch gets flipped and you see the risk, inherent risk, but that's why a lot of the energy and the anger comes out through people who feel they have nothing to lose and are bulletproof. So, well, we've been at it about an hour. What else? Is there anything that we missed that you thought you would talk about or we would get into today in terms of just what? I mean, we covered a lot.
We covered a lot, man. No, I'm just appreciative of the opportunity. I think, you know, using business and establishing more ownership are two of the ways that, you know, we can, you know, advance the cause for social justice here in the city and in the country. The police departments are one of the most overt places where racism is still allowed to live. And that's not just here in GR, that's everywhere. They're kind of like the front lines occupying militaristic force that has been used against people of color in you know, in the community. And that's unfortunate, you know, because black people pay taxes and we contribute to their salaries, and we shouldn't if they're not going to serve and protect.
Right.
You know, when they go out to the suburbs and there's a thing with white kids, you know, they break it up, but they treat them with the utmost respect and with...
Yeah, they scoot them along and no one's getting handcuffed on the side of the tennis court or whatever it is.
And they come down, they get one of us, pull one of us over. I've been having bad experiences with, you know, with the police since I was probably like 13, 14 years old. You know, accused of stealing a bike in East Grand Rapids to being pulled over when we, you know, started driving, all that kind of stuff. So, but the greater issues, right, the more underlying issues are economic ones now.
Yeah.
You know, and those are a little bit more difficult to solve because if we're all running this great American race, you know, the starting line for us is, you know, kind of way after a lot of other people. But I do think that there are things that we can be doing in the black community to support one another better. I look at some of my brothers and sisters from the Latinx community, and I love the way that they pull their resources together in order to, you know, buy neighborhoods and try to empower economically. Even when they, you know, English is a second language for them, they're still able to overcome those barriers and build. And they could build more if they weren't, you know, enduring so much racism, you know, from the majority and the power structures and whatnot. But I think that there are things that we can be doing as a people better that will give us even more sovereignty. I think the answer lies with us. I'm not waiting for any white guy to come down from his corporate office to come help me address what needs to go down in Southeast Grand Rapids. You know, I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't believe that's the way it should happen. You know, I'm looking at us to come up with the answers. And then, you know, this new term, you know, your white allies, anybody who considers themselves a conscious person and a person who cares about their community and they feel compelled, they should come down and partner with the people who have the answers. And I think we have the answers.
I think so, too. I appreciate you. I admire you and your team and your people. I respect very much just watching. You talk about hustle, but after each one of my interviews with AB, who's not a business partner in your traditional businesses, but Willie the Kid and SuperDre, Andrea, Wallace, you know, I get fired up because there's more I want to do. There's more things I want to do as a business person. And I see you guys doing it as I would any other entrepreneur in town that I respect and go, okay, I need some extra hustle. Like I can, and for that's been amazing to watch. And I can't wait for a lot of this COVID to die down so we can build on the next steps of everything that we just talked about.
We got to work together, man. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you. Well, if you made it this far in this audio episode, you've enjoyed it. You've hung in there. It was a very intense conversation about during a tense time in our city. And we as every facet of our communities has a lot of work to do to create a more equitable system and to disrupt those traditional barriers that stand in the way of people of color. Our Black and Hispanic friends are just every part of our community. Our Asian friends, they do not have the same playing field that our traditional Grand Rapids businesses have, being white-owned. Let's just be frank about it. So one request, please, as always, I will be releasing video excerpts of this conversation, some of the more powerful and concise excerpts of this conversation will be shared on Facebook and LinkedIn and other social platforms. Please share these if you align at all or even disagree. Share these videos. It will help all of us have an understanding of parts of the community that we may or may not have that much contact with. Excuse me. We might not have that much contact with various parts of the community that are voicing so strongly the need for change. So please share these videos. Jonathan's a brilliant man, very, very easy to understand his perspective and the drive and the commitment he has to our city with love and progress and growth. So, hey man, just thank you as always as listening. This was a great way to get back started again after COVID, and there's a lot more to come. So thank you. Get at it, everybody. Have a great week. This Full Exposure podcast episode has been made possible through the support of Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn, who believe that creativity and the arts are essential to a rich, healthy, and fulfilling life.